Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Scott Silverman, co-founder of Commerce Next. We're a community event series and conference for marketers at retail and DTC brands. And we are back resuming our weekly webinars after taking a little bit of time off to focus on our virtual summit on the end of July. On behalf of my co-founders, Veronica Sonsev and Alan Dick, I'd like to welcome you back and join us. Today's topic is why 2020 is actually the year of mobile. Some of you have may seen SMS was one of the two emerging technologies in Commerce Next marketing research that we released at the end of July, where digitals are actually increasing investments post-COVID. And the other is AR/VR. But we're really excited to have a chance to dig into this topic and hear, understand what's happening, hear how different brands are using SMS to drive sales, why this increase in investment is happening. We'll be taking questions, so feel free to load them up during the presentation. And thank you all for tuning in and taking time to join live or listen to the replay, of course. We hope that you're all continuing to stay healthy and safe and having a good summer so far. So a couple important thank yous I want to offer. The first is for all of our speakers today. We have a great group. Robbie Facer, Director of Digital Brand Marketing at Unique Vintage. Kent Zimmerman, VP of E-Commerce and Consumer Technology at Shoe Carnival. Nicole Snow, founder and CEO of Darn Good Yarn. And Brian Long, CEO and co-founder of Attentive. So I know how busy you all are and really am grateful and appreciative for taking the time to be a part of this and share your insights with the community. So wanted to talk about the agenda for today. First, I just want to go through some upcoming events we have, a little bit of housekeeping notes on how different things related to our webinar platform. And then Brian from Attentive is going to give an overview of SMS. We'll have a couple of questions we're going to ask everybody in audience polls, and then we'll have a panel discussion and take some questions from the audience. Again, we encourage folks to do that. So what's coming up next Wednesday, August 19th, how customer insights can elevate acquisition. And we have a nice panel, including folks at Anastasia Beverly Hills, Ashley Stewart, Ursa Major Skincare, Decile, and my co-founder Veronica Sonsev is going to be moderating that. So please join us, bit.ly/CNWeb17 to go and register and learn more. And we are doing another virtual summit one day this time on Wednesday, October 7th from 1 to 3:30. That is going to be focused on holiday optimization. So save the date. We'll get more details about that coming up shortly. So a couple things I wanted to mention about the webinar platform. As I mentioned, you can ask questions. Look, the console you'll see in the upper right, everything you need is there. If you want to ask a question, just ask it down below where the red circle is. And then if you see a question that someone else posed and you like it, you can upvote it, and that'll help increase it in priority to be answered. And then there are some handouts. So if you look on the handouts area, you can download, and I believe Brian's going to talk a little bit about what's in that handout. Also, we'll have a copy of the presentation in there as well. And then finally, for those people that are watching the replay, you can see that the handouts in the bottom right is what you want to click there. So let me open up Brian's slides. Brian, if you want to turn your camera on.
Hey, how are you, Scott?
Good. Thanks for joining us. And there's your slides. So I'm going to turn my camera off and let you run with it here.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Scott, and happy to be a part of this Commerce Next community that Scott and team have done such a great part in building. So, I'm very happy to be here today talking about why 2020 is actually the year of mobile, a thing that we've heard a lot of times. And certainly, I think mobile just continues to get more and more important. What we're going to focus on in this presentation before opening up to this panel is specific to mobile messaging and text messaging in particular. So I guess just quickly, a little bit of background on our company, Attentive, and where some of this information is coming from. Attentive is a personalized mobile messaging platform working predominantly with retail and e-commerce brands. Our company is about 4 years old. We have about 380 people that work at the company today. We've raised over 163 million in capital, most recently 110 million from Sequoia Capital this past April, so April 2020, pretty recent. And we're working with about 1,500 companies today. Specific to retail and e-commerce, there's about half of the top 1,000 online retailers that are doing text message marketing today. We work with over 330 of them for text message marketing. So we're more than 10 times bigger than the next closest competitor for text message marketing for online retailers. So that's what we do. And in today's presentation, we're going to cover 4 different topics. Number one, some of the things that we are seeing that are shifting in consumer behavior, some of which just towards mobile in general, but in particular in the COVID business environment. We've been tracking the revenue and information from our thousands of customers, and we're going to lay out some of the things we're seeing. Secondly, we're going to talk about how brands are responding to that change, looking at some of the strategies that brands are employing to just kind of deal with this massive change. Something we call here at Attentive, survival of the fastest. So how are these companies moving fast to be able to shift? Third is around how they're using SMS for communications, and we'll go through a couple examples, including some of the companies on today's panel. And then finally, just a quick preview into how you might launch your own SMS channel. And I guess the point I'd make here is that our average company does 18.54% of their revenue from SMS marketing. And we can make this a very big channel for you quickly. And we offer a totally free, no obligation trial to prove it. Great. So let's get started with changing consumer behaviors. Number one, wow. E-commerce has taken off like crazy. I don't think that should come as a big surprise to those of us here working remotely, knowing how much that we're buying online. But it's pretty amazing. During April and May, consumers spent more than they spent in all of holiday last year. So we've just seen a tremendous amount of movement towards online purchasing. Now, a lot of that has obviously been in the essentials and in things like food and beverage. But we've also seen growth in other areas too. At the same time, we've seen a lot of that growth happening on mobile commerce, on people buying on their mobile devices. And I think what's interesting here is that a lot of these habits that people are setting, maybe they're buying groceries for the first time on their phone. Maybe they're experimenting with buying, from their favorite skincare brand on their phone, or their shoes, or whatever it is. They have a high tendency to continue to do these behaviors. The majority of people said that they expect to keep doing and keep purchasing online and keeping these types of new behaviors. What we've seen data-wise on our platform is pretty staggering. A very large growth in the amount of consumers that are signing up to get messages. We compared January and February to March 30th through April 12th. And during that time period, we saw a 53% higher number in the number of people that were signing up to get text messages from Attentive customers. Now, what's driving that change? It's more traffic, and it's also a higher number of converting people that are choosing to sign up. And then finally, we're also seeing a movement even more towards reaching millennials and Gen Z. And in particular, millennials are very interested in seeking out what we call here brave brands, which are brands that are really standing up and promoting their beliefs, Obviously, there's been a lot of brands that are standing on different sides of the different things that are happening here, and consumers, and in particular millennials, are really noticing that. So that's something that a lot of the brands we work with have been aware of and have changed their messaging accordingly. So that's a little bit about some of the numbers that we're seeing around shifted consumer behavior. Big movement towards online purchasing, big movement towards mobile devices, and keying in towards consumers that really want to see brands that stand for something. Now let's look at how brands are actually shifting their messages. So, brands are obviously shifting to a bigger investment in e-commerce. Everyone is saying, how can my site be better? How can I make this on a better platform? How can I deal with this scale? I think that e-commerce is being prioritized more than it ever was before. I think historically, retail was front and center. Everything kind of retail got a lot of the activity, and then e-commerce was sort of the stepchild that didn't get that same attention. Now it's really being brought front and center. We're also seeing the dollars being allocated more than ever towards e-commerce, and I think a lot of this may be obvious because we've seen this shift through COVID. But again, going to the point from before, how much are these habits going to stay? When consumers realize how easy it is to, say, buy groceries online, how likely are they to keep that habit? I also think it's great to see brands who are building a deeper connection with the consumer. I do think it's gotten a little harder for some brands to acquire new customers, but it's a great opportunity to build a relationship with their existing customers and really be making that connection with them. This is an example of company Swim Outlet, largest seller of swimwear online in the US. And they actually had a series of videos from Olympians where via text message you could reply back in order to get a video from different Olympians on kind of how they're responding to everything that's going on in the world. So that's a little bit about how brands are shifting. Let's look at using SMS as a communication channel and why SMS might be an interesting channel for those brands. Looking at this survey data from Commerce Next, pretty striking here. We're looking at where people are going to have their investment in January versus June. And what jumped out here is that SMS is the only channel where, in a true emerging channel, where they're going to be spending more. You can see down here on the smaller spends, the only other one is virtual reality for online store. So you can kind of see how SMS and messaging, big movement here, as well as things to augment the e-commerce experience. So, what has happened? Why is that change happening? A few years back, a while ago, you saw that a lot of consumers still paid per text message. Today, almost every plan, 99.85% of cellular plans offer unlimited messaging. So consumers are more willing than ever to get messages from brands via text. And when we send those messages, we see more than 10 times more revenue per message than email. Why is that happening? Well, think about your own experience with text. If you get a text message, you almost always read all of them. And then the chances of you clicking, there's not that much content. So the link might be a third, half of the content in terms of its position on the screen. So the opportunity to then engage is much, much higher and much more focused. So, we think that this holiday season, you're going to see tremendous growth. Last year it was $50 billion in revenue. We think that it's going to continue to grow as the percentage of sales that come from smartphones rises up and up. So, now that we understand some of the ways that consumer behavior has changed, how some brands are dealing with that change in behavior, and why SMS matters, let's talk a little bit about how particular brands are using it, and then I'm looking forward to chatting with the panel about how they're thinking about things today. So, number one, I think that text is a very personal channel. So sending messages that are relevant to the consumer is more important than ever. In this example, personalization is really driven by data. And we're seeing that Shoe Carnival is using the data, in this case, a person that abandoned shopping cart, in order to send them a personalized message. Across our platform, we use everything from that type of behavioral data, like what they're browsing, what they're buying, to information like where they're located. How can we send something at the appropriate time zone? In this example, we're not going to send these messages if it might be a time when the consumer is asleep. We also mentioned earlier in the presentation how much millennials in particular really like brands that are resonating to their values and being more bold. Here's a great example of Unique Vintage, just showing their support for Pride and the Pride collection, and then rolling that out to how they're actually pushing a large percentage of their profits to go to a nonprofit in this area. And we've seen a lot of brands do that sort of mission-based thing, and it's really resonating. The engagement rates and the conversion rates tend to be extremely high. And then finally, of course, we also see during the holiday season a lot of different verbiage around different types of promotions and sales. If I had to make a guess for what's going to happen this year, last year we saw a lot of our Black Friday text messaging programs and promotions go live 4 or 5 days before Black Friday. Everyone was kind of trying to get ahead of it. I think you'll see people pull that forward even more. I think you're going to see Black Friday sales a week before, even a week and a half, 2 weeks before, in order to reach those consumers so that they don't miss out on that holiday budget. And it's not all promotional. I think that another great example is being able to things like back in stock, product-based launches, and even things like complimentary shipping or other types of promotions. I think some of the strongest messages we see, and certainly from an engagement rate, are those messages that are not promotional in nature, but instead letting people know about new releases that came out. We've actually had messages with over 100% click-through rate for drops around new products, new things that are available. And then finally, double clicking a little bit into, kind of the types of ways that people are reaching consumers during the holidays. We're seeing things like limited time. That's very popular, trying to reach people when it might be the best time for them. 12 days of deals, really fun ways to do something that's, they're waiting for each day or every couple of days, and they know that they're going to get it. I also really like the exclusives. We've seen some pretty fun ones where they'll only give you an hour. They only give you, I saw one, I remember 13 minutes was how long you had to respond. So a lot of these sort of time urgency-based messages very popular as well. And then finally, a lot of brands are not just sending that first message, but nudging a second and a third time. The average brand was sending 2 messages or more on Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and often in the run-up to it as well. Just trying to get that engagement during, those key holiday shopping days. And as I mentioned, we saw some brands that were ahead of it by a couple of days last year. I bet it's going to shift even further back. I bet it's going to go beyond a week for brands that are doing their sales really early in order to be the first to reach the consumer. So, finally, if you're thinking about what to do within text, a few things. Number one, most of our customers who work with us never done text before. It's a very complicated channel. There's a lot of things to know. We have dedicated client strategy who would help you avoid the pitfalls, really focus on what we've seen work for our over 1,000 customers and get you on the right path. Number two, you have to get consumers opted in order to send them messages. You can't, show up a week before Black Friday and say, turn it on and expect to have a material amount of subscribers. It's an investment that needs to happen over time. So if you're wanting to reach this channel and drive the 15, 20% plus of incremental revenue from it during holiday, then you need to start building your SMS list right now. Third is around defining the goals. You need to sit down and figure out what are the main things that we're hoping to get here. I think that the most common ones we see are growing the SMS subscriber list, revenue driven from subscribers, and ensuring that consumers are having a good experience. Looking at how many people are opting out, what the click-through and engagement rates are. Finally, you got to pay attention to the performance. We have a lot of measurement that we do in order to track how many people are signing up, how many people are clicking, how many people are unsubscribing, all that sort of thing. Even sentiment, how people are responding to messages. Need to track that closely in order to optimize and augment your program. And finally, we do offer a completely free trial of our product. So you can go try it out totally for free. The trial starts when you actually start sending text messages. And, we launch hundreds of customers every month right now. And we convert 97% of those free trials to a paying program. But if you don't like it on day 29, no problem. We hope to do better for you next time. And there's no obligation attached. So hopefully we can make that additional 18.5% of revenue in online sales or more for you. And if you want to work with us, please feel free to email events@attentivemobile.com. And we're going to be setting you up with a personalized demo as well as a holiday gift. Who doesn't want a holiday gift that you can have for yourself, or maybe get some of that shopping done very early. So thank you again. I'm Brian Long, CEO of Attentive, and I will look back for the rest of our panel to rejoin. So hopefully we can talk through some more stuff.
Great. Thanks, Brian. It was really good data and interesting to have you share some of the key trends that we're seeing post-COVID and how SMS is able to really be complementary to them. So the next thing I want to do here, I'm going to go back to the other slides. Is we're going to kind of take the temperature of our audience. Maybe that's not a good term these days. Kind of get the pulse of the audience on what we're thinking about. So you'll see you're going to see a pop-up on your screen with some questions, but then if you want to go and see what the final polls are, you'll see again in your console, go down to that close button and click on that. So I'm going to launch the first one. And this one is asking, since COVID started, how has mobile traffic changed to your site? And the options are significantly higher, somewhat higher, about the same, a little bit lower, or significantly lower. So let's see what everyone's experiencing with their mobile traffic. All right, so it seems like everybody is either significantly or somewhat higher, with somewhat and significantly being kind of neck and neck here. So interesting, kind of expecting that, and makes sense given the fact that you're dialing into this conversation on mobile and SMS. So let me go to the next question. How likely do you think your customers will embrace receiving promotions from you via SMS? And some of you may already be doing it, so that answer exactly right now. But is it very likely, somewhat not likely at all? So again, it seems like there's a pretty strong indication that your customers are willing to embrace receiving promotions. So it's good. Makes sense that, again, that you're all part of this conversation. There's a lot to learn about how to take advantage of that. So the next and final poll question, and this is teeing up next week's webinar, which is focused on using customer insights to leverage for customer acquisition. And so the question is, how would you grade your company's ability to collect and leverage customer insights to use for customer acquisition? So going back to school, kind of A through F, A, B, C, D, F, how are you grading yourselves? Well, it's a fairly modest group, although most of you are feeling pretty good about it. About 40% or maybe a little bit less rate yourselves an A, and we have a few B's and C's and some D's. Thankfully, no one is completely failing in this, or is at least voting that way. So I'm going to close this poll, and I'm going to invite all the panelists to go ahead and turn their mics on. And we'll get into our panel discussion. So I'm just going to open up all our cameras here. And thank you all again for joining us. So I'd like to have everybody introduce themselves and their companies, share a bit about how you're currently using mobile to drive e-commerce sales, how that's evolved over, say, the past year, and including, what you've seen from the impact of COVID. So I will, I don't know if everybody's screen looks the same as mine, but I'll start on my left with Robbie from Unique Vintage.
Cool. Hi, guys. Assuming everybody can hear me okay.
Yep.
Cool. So I'm Robbie. I'm the digital marketing or digital brand marketing director here at Unique Vintage, or as a lot of you may know us as uniquevintage.com. For those of you who are on who aren't familiar with us, we are a vintage-inspired, primarily women's clothing company who is natively digital. So at our core, even though we have a presence all over the world in wholesale markets, we are really an e-commerce company, right? So as you can imagine, the last 6 months, like with everyone, has been a little bit of a challenge in a good and a bad way, as we really learned how to pivot our strategy. We were lucky again because we are, as I said, natively digital. So we're primarily focused on what is that experience on the website, right? And what does that look like for our customers? So we took the opportunity here as we were kind of facing this whole new world, starting back in probably early March, right? When things really started to hit here in the States. And we said, all right, well, we know who our customer is, right? We know our core customer, and we know that their behavior has probably changed a little bit because they're not necessarily going to be sitting in front of a computer at an office or job or at school or whatever it may have been. And they're probably going to be on their phone a heck of a lot more. We already see a really large penetration on the mobile side coming to the site anyway, but we took the opportunity really at the beginning of all of this and did a deep dive into who that customer was and what or how they wanted to hear from us. So what channels were they really going to respond the most to? Were they just email people? Were they just social people? Were they a mixture of the two? Or more recently, were they text people? Did they just love to receive texts and things? And then we kind of took it from there. Like anyone, I think there was probably a lot of trial and error. We were looking at the data all the time and really trying to be cognizant of what was resonating and also what was too much or not enough, right? Because like all of us, we're going through a lot. Everybody that is a customer, potential customer, social engager with us was also going through a lot. So we've taken, a good look at ourselves, and I think we're in a good spot now. But it was definitely a big opportunity and a little bit of a rocky road, like it was for everyone, I'm sure.
Great. And Nicole, just help us introduce Darn Good Yarn and a little bit about, what you've been doing with SMS and how that's evolved over a little bit of time, and including what happened with COVID from SMS or with SMS.
Thanks, Scott. So Darn Good Yarn is a digitally native brand. I started the company about 12 years ago, and it was really just out of this drive and love of wanting to learn how to knit, and it quickly spiraled into this kind of really cool market where we serve this creative lifestyle. So it's your knitters, crocheters, people who I think you might think is like grandmas, but it's gotten like a lot cooler. I promise everyone out there who are non-crafters, we actually serve a $44 billion industry. The other good part of Darn Good Yarn is in our middle name, good. We have a huge feel-good component to our company. Since I started, we've saved about 2 million pounds of material waste from heading back into landfills, and we've turned that into a lot of the items that we sell. And I also employ about 600 artisans between India and Nepal with sustainable working wage jobs. So we take those initiatives very seriously as part of how we just run the whole machine of what Darn Good Yarn is. We've also been on the Inc. 5000 for the past 4 years in a row, which is cool because we're totally self-funded out of the bank of Nicole Snow. And so we've been working really hard there. When you look back last year at mobile and what we were doing, we weren't doing anything. And we really started to engage with Attentive at the beginning of this year and say, okay, like what can we do on the site? And it was one of those, like, thank God we started SMS, especially being a small business. It actually last month was 7% of our overall revenue, and we had some crazy engagement that I can talk about later on. But mobile for us has been, when I look back at last month, we had spikes where 81% of our conversions on certain days were coming only from mobile, which is like, it blows through a lot of records that we've been seeing. And I don't see that decelerating at all. I think that, just as Brian hit on in his deck, that behaviors are changing. And it's been such a long time now, since March in a lot of cases, where people are buying their groceries online and doing all this, that those are behavioral changes that were made. And I really believe that they're here to stay. In terms of the impact of COVID, we're a customer-centric company. So it had us pause for a moment, I think like everyone else, and we're like, let's just stop, no quick movements. And we really reevaluated what our personas were and doing like real day in the life studies and saying, okay, like, what is Betty Sue doing on the day-to-day? She's probably doing work from home like everyone else on 72 Zoom calls and then dealing with her kids. And she's also our core customer. So how is she treating herself at the end of the day? And that even helped us with timing, because like if you have the young children, especially, you only get like that 11 o'clock time period at night. And when we started to uncover those small little points of inflection to meet with the customer and engage them, we started to see a lot of really great and powerful metrics coming out of that.
Well, I know when we were on the preparation call, you mentioned that you saw some very unique behaviors in like that March, April timeframe, and then you recently kind of did a check-in, and I'm kind of curious if you can share what you learned from that. If those SMS patterns and mobile usage, if that stabilized, if it stayed at that high level, what have you learned?
So I think initially we were kind of doing a big blast, and we were learning like segmentation as we went along. Brian, I really liked what you said. I actually wrote it down, is a survival of the fastest. I've heard that before, but I'm going to coin you with that now to put on my desk. But we did this like very wide net cast initially with SMS. And as we continue to build our list, by the day, it's now getting into this hyper segmentation. And that's where we're really starting to reap true benefits and getting to know what customers are buying, what are they doing on their abandoned cart sequence. So there's just a lot of testing, and that's where we're starting to see, we're seeing like in some cases, like almost 9% click-through rates going through on some of our messages going out, which is great for us.
Great. Well, I'm seeing some questions come in from the audience. We will get to those, so just please be patient. And also want to remind everyone, if you go into the handout section, you can download, there's a white paper from Attentive, but also Brian's deck is in there as well. So Kent, want to make sure I get to you as well. Shoe Carnival, help everybody, if they're not familiar with Shoe Carnival, just a little bit of who you are and kind of how's SMS marketing evolved for you guys, and what did you learn from COVID related to SMS marketing?
Sure. Hi, Kent from Shoe Carnival. I'm VP of Ecom, and I also manage consumer technology. So all the bits and pieces that fall into our marketing tech stack, like Attentive. Mobile has been a huge push for us over the last couple of years. I think last year we kind of talked about thinking mobile first over the last couple of years, and we try to get people to think that way. But I think last year is when we really started putting that into practice, right? So as it relates to mobile commerce as a whole, we made a lot of changes last year to help prepare ourselves for what we thought were the normal seasons, back to school and holiday this year, right? So we're doing some things around headless with progressive web apps and AMP, and we rolled all that stuff out in Q1 of this year to help increase our opportunity to convert lower in the funnel. And SMS was, we really kind of made a bet on SMS heading out of holiday last year. We had a program, right? I think we've had an SMS program for about 3 years, but I kind of feel like we were just dabbling in it. We were trying to learn some things, working with a handful of partners. We started working earnestly with Attentive towards the beginning of the year. And that's when we really kind of redoubled our efforts in terms of how we approach SMS as a marketing channel, as a communications channel, and with great success. I think some of the things Brian talked about in one of his closing slides was the subject matter expertise that they brought. I think has accelerated our program immensely. We partially probably because of COVID as well, but we were doubling our SMS list about every year, and we doubled it like in the first 5 months with Attentive. And I think a lot of that has to do with the experience, the kind of this 2-step process that they have. It's really resonated well with our customers. So COVID, we have 393 stores. I know there's a lot of folks that probably don't know Shoe Carnival. We're not on the West Coast. We're not in the Northeast. If we're in one of your markets, you probably know us. If not, we're just a shoe retailer. But we've got really engaging in-store experience. And COVID comes along, we have to close all of our stores. So obviously we felt the same pressures that I think everybody else has. And I think as a business, within a much larger business, we had to shift to start thinking more like Robbie and Nicole as a pure play retailer. We no longer have some of our marketing opportunities and marketing channels available to us with our stores closed. So our single line of revenue is now the e-com site. How do we circle the wagons around that part of our business? And I think SMS was a big part of it. It's been a huge customer acquisition channel for us. Some of the click-throughs we see and just welcome messages, 90% click-through rates. I love seeing, I know Brian showed it in one of the early examples, our abandoned cart messages. So doing that through SMS is pretty new to us. We're seeing upwards of 30% and higher click-through rates on abandoned cart emails. So, we're not quite to where, you said, I think Brian, you said maybe 18% revenue directly attributable to SMS. We're not quite there yet, but exponentially higher. We're close to half that right now, which I'm pretty pleased with. And we know that it'll only grow. Our mobile traffic has maybe stepped down just a few basis points, but not in a meaningful direction. So it's really right where it was. I think this shift in consumer behavior towards the online experience and towards the online experience on a small screen is not going to go backwards in any meaningful way.
So you mentioned how your SMS subscriber list increased significantly. I don't know if you have a couple things you can tell us about, when you launched, how you went about doing that. And then I want to, kind of bring the rest of the panelists into some questions about, like how do you decide, what types of messages to send. But maybe like Kent, just help us understand as a little bit of a follow-up to what you were just saying of, how did you build that subscriber base on SMS?
Sure. Well, again, we had spent the prior year or two trying to organically build the list and really just offering SMS as a communications vehicle for our customers to learn about promotions, and that was really it, right? I don't believe that we had a real value proposition that we were putting in front of the customer as to why they would sign up. I think a lot of the customers were the ones that signed up were the ones that were like, yeah, I'd rather get this on my phone than in my email. I don't check email, or I miss them. So it was important to them to not miss some of the promotions that we had. And then I think the migration to Attentive, which went very smoothly, we just kind of worked with them to better understand what's valuable to the customer. Yeah, promotions are valuable, but we do a lot of a lot of these time-sensitive promotions and things where we want to make sure that our customer knows that a promotion is ending or a flash sale is ending. So that's been extremely valuable. And I think we've just learned with their help how to better position SMS as a communications channel to the customer through call to action and through that initial sign up. That's been extremely valuable to us.
I mean, it sounds like customers are just naturally inclined to want to use that channel.
Sure.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Which is a great foundation for that. So, as I mentioned, I wanted to hear everybody talk about, I mean, there's, Brian gave a number of different examples of how you can, the different types of messaging that you can send. Some might be offers and discounts. Some might be reinforcing existing campaigns. And I'm interested to hear how you're all kind of thinking through, how you decide, what types of messages you want to be sending to customers. Robbie, you want to kind of jump in with that?
Sure. It's a great question, especially right now, right? But it's not something that we just started to think about as we entered COVID times. It's something that we've been with Attentive, I think close to when Attentive started, actually, was also the time we rolled out an SMS platform and strategy for the brand. And so it's been a little over, probably close to 2 years now that we've been with Attentive. And honestly, those first, 6 to 9 months, we were a little all over the place. And it wasn't because we didn't have a concrete marketing or communication strategy for the customers or how we wanted to talk to people. It was more so because we didn't know what the platform meant, right? We were like, this is an incredibly easy platform with Attentive to use. It takes any guesswork out of it if you've never set anything up like that before. And the team there was great with us, but actually understanding how to really activate on messaging and whether people just wanted, to Kent's point, promotional things from us, if they wanted, beautiful content from us, like they might see on Instagram, if they wanted something else, what was it? And so we went through a lot of trial and error initially, and then we kind of went back to that about a year later when everything started with the pandemic, because we said, okay, well, listen, text at its core for us has been a direct response tool, right? And some of that is because I think, like all of us, we get it on our phone and we're like, oh, what is this? And immediately you have this moment where you're like, okay, am I going to click through this and I'm going to engage with this right now because this has piqued my interest, or am I just going to toss it aside or go back to what I was doing? And in early March, we had a pretty major launch. We had a launch with I Love Lucy as a collaboration. We do a lot of capsules like that. And we were a little nervous because we were like, it's like the middle of March right now. Everything is shutting down. How is the response going to be to that? So we went forward with it and had a really positive response, which is a testament to the subscriber base. But after that, we really just did a lot of trial and error. And we said, okay, do people want to hear about promotional stuff? What's that going to mean to them? How much is too much? Do people want to hear about launches or early access? And ultimately what happened is, interestingly enough, everything we learned in the last year when we said, this channel for people who are subscribed to text is where they want to hear from us first and foremost. And so they want things like early access. And early access to big launches is actually what outperforms everything else, even if it's an incredible promotion, because I think they tend to be super engaged, right? If you want to actually have someone coming into your phone and not just into an email inbox, it's a different experience. And so that's kind of where we are now and where we're headed and where we'll continue to head as we, start trickier things like segmentation and stuff like that, in addition to what we're already doing with flows and campaign sends.
Great. I mean, we have a lot of questions to cover. I don't know, Kent or Nicole, if you had any significantly different experience than Robbie just mentioned. Otherwise, we can move into some other questions.
I'll just briefly expand on segmentation, that it has been absolutely critical for us so we don't have the unsubscribes. And we have, with our community, they also love DIY tutorials, free content as well. And thinking about how to actually reignite, I don't want to say expired customers, but the ones who haven't really visited you in 90 days. And so we've really gone through with this like 1-2 punch of send content through Attentive. And then, oh yeah, by the way, do you want to buy something? And that's actually worked. I mean, our Christmas in July was a testament to that, because we had 30 days of like hardcore promotion, but it was peppered with a lot of content, and that really got our audience super excited. And to make sure that you're echoing what you're doing, just like in the old days where you wouldn't take a Facebook post and put it like the same thing across all your other socials. It's the same thing here. You want to make sure that you're tailoring it, but it's still cohesive across all of your other sales channels.
Right. I mean, just because it's a new channel doesn't mean don't need to be relevant and think about segmentation like you did with other channels. So makes a lot of sense. So there was a question that came in. It got 3 upvotes so far. And it's saying, I see many millennials do not check. This came from Paul. I don't know his last name. Do not check text. They go straight to DMs. Any thoughts? So I don't know, Brian, you want to address that and see if any other folks, did you get the essence of that question?
Yeah, it's you said that some millennials don't check their text messaging but go straight to DMs. Was that the?
Yes.
Well, what's a DM? Is that like on Twitter?
Yeah, I was people. I want
Direct message.
3 upvotes. I mean,
So,
Facebook Messenger or Twitter or some other social platforms.
yeah, I worked at Twitter for a few years before starting this company, and saw the opportunity in messaging from there. We've actually run programs on Facebook Messenger as well as SMS, because some folks were interested in reaching people on Messenger and other channels. 2 things I'd say. One, the most interest for Facebook Messenger came from reaching an older audience, which is like funny to say now when we know the history of Facebook, but they wanted to reach like an audience between, maybe like 50 to 70 that they thought were more on Facebook. 2, we ran on Facebook. The performance was just significantly less than SMS. The engagement rate, click-through rates, always lower. And Facebook has different rules around when they show a notification. It's got a different interface. I think that it's more common to not read messages on Facebook Messenger. So, they've been adjusting, and I think it'll be interesting to see where Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp net out over the next couple of years. We'd love to see them become big channels. I think particularly internationally, where SMS is not, SMS is the ubiquitous solution everyone uses in the US. But in other countries, it's not that way, right? WhatsApp or Facebook or Line or other things are that. And I think we have the potential in other countries to get there. But I don't think that Facebook yet has kind of opened that up to a lot of use cases. But I'm hopeful that they will. But for now, text is definitely still king in the US.
Any other follow-up comments from the panelists, or we can move on to other topics? Like I said, we have a lot to cover. So if I don't see, I'll take the no head nodding as moving on.
Silence is excitement, Scott. That's what we said.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, I mean, there's been a lot of positive talk about SMS marketing and text message marketing. I think a lot of people are also wondering, like, is there a point of saturation? I mean, it is a very personal channel for folks to get that. And I mean, I think we began at hinting at some of the answers there, which is be relevant, segment, be smart about what you're sending, so it doesn't get saturated. But I don't know, Kent, do you want to, what are your thoughts on that? Is that something you are concerned about? Are you proactively preventing that from happening already?
So yes, we are concerned about it. I think anytime you have a program of this size, you really need to pay close attention to how many people are opting out, right? That either speaks to relevance or we could just be hitting them too often. So, I think in our case, we do have the ability to segment, and we need to better understand how many of the folks that we're messaging with through SMS are we also emailing, and which do they prefer? Are we asking them which they would rather hear from us on? In a lot of cases, it may be both. And in other cases, personally, I think the way to combat some of this is to just expand the number of ways that you communicate with your customer. It can't all be, if all we do is send a promotional SMS to our list and just batch and blast, no different than email, you're going to get the same thing that you get with email, and people are going to get tired of receiving that content, and maybe even quicker because they've always got their phone with them, right? They're not checking their promotions tab in Gmail constantly, right? They're not getting notified constantly, but they get that notification on their phone. So the likelihood that they can immediately go like, you know what, I'm just tired of hearing the same message from you guys that's not relevant to me. You run that risk higher, I think, with SMS. So that's what we're focusing on, and I think that's where we're still learning. But again, we see the success with abandoned cart, welcome text, that when we touch them, it's usually for a good reason, and that's why we're getting really good CTRs.
Robbie or Nicole, any other? Or sorry, Brian, you want something?
I was just going to jump in and add one point there. I think Kent makes some really great points around, hey, let's make sure we're not driving opt-outs. The biggest way that we've seen opt-outs driven, number one is sending a text message to someone when they don't want to get text. So, something we've implemented is not sending messages when they might be asleep based on their local time. So we don't send messages between 9 p.m. and 9 a.m. That's a huge difference. You think about, say, you got triggered messages, Kent mentioned abandoned cart. On email, if they were shopping last night at 1 a.m., you might still send your abandoned cart, at 1 a.m. 24 hours later and not think about it. For text, you cannot do that. That'll really annoy customers. Yeah. Number two is you got to pay attention to those responses. So if someone responds back with like a negative thing or seems like they might be trying to opt out, we automatically listen for that and remind them how to opt out, how to make sure they can set their messages, and get away from that. The third thing is, I think Ken's example around email is right on. We need to make sure this doesn't become, unfortunately, what I think email's become. We do have some benefit to things. One, you have to get people's express written consent to get the messages. And there's actual real regulation around TCPA, which is a blessing and a curse because there's lawsuits around it. But the good news is that it really diminishes the amount of spam in the channel because there's actually laws around the messaging. Two, text messaging is a lot more expensive than sending emails. Again, this is kind of a blessing and a curse. The blessing, though, is that because it's a lot more expensive, people are going to really focus on only sending when they have something relevant to say. I think that email has kind of turned into a circular ad where people just send 2 messages every day, nonstop messages because, there's no spam controls and there's no cost. I think text is the opposite of that, for better or worse. There's a lot of affordances to that. And I think it will protect the channel a bit, but we really also have to make sure that we're sending more and more personal messages and getting better at that personalization.
Yeah, Scott, I was just going to say that we find with SMS, there's a real opportunity to emulate a human tempo. And when you look back, when you probably started email, there was a very human tempo to that as well. And then, it did just turn into this. It is like a circular in that way. And I think it's very important to maintain that integrity for your list to be successful.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for adding that. So there's a question that came from Linda Shine asking about, we had the other question before about the millennials and Instagram and direct messages, but this is more on older demographics, women age 50 plus. I am interested to hear from any of the panelists if, do you have a pretty good sense of how big that demographic is in your lists, and what is their kind of level of engagement? How effective is it with that segment of the population?
For a Darn Good Yarn, that's a huge part of our core population of customers, and it slays for us. I think we've sort of followed the social behavior where we've had this older customer go to Facebook, and then there's a slight burnout that happens. And we've found that, like, I'm sure some of the younger people on the call probably only text their grandmothers and mothers in group texts. And okay, like, what's happening in that situation? So they know how to use text message now. And we've seen fantastic results from that demographic. So I wouldn't, this is not a millennial play at all. And I think that, again, like, people know how to do tech. My 86-year-old grandmother knows how to use text and use her gifts and all of this. So there's a real way to delight your customer in those instances as well.
Robbie or Ken, any other thoughts on that 50+ category?
It's a smaller portion of our population. Our customer base is probably more of a core millennial at the end of the day, but we do, of course, have, right? We're open for everybody, and we would love for everybody to be shopping with us. So we're always thinking about making sure that whatever the message is, that it's meaningful, right? And ultimately, I think that applies regardless of age or demographic info. It needs to be something, like everybody else on this panel has kind of said, that matters to people, and then that you put in play with things like advanced segmentation, and not forgetting that with text, you can segment the same way you can to email customers who are just dress buyers or who are super engaged and open and click through everything you send, and make sure that you're pulsing that communication to all of them, regardless of age or demographic.
So another question that came in from Gregorio Pinto, and he earlier was very complimentary of the presentation, said it was all meat, no fat. And Gregorio, flattery gets you everywhere, so we're going to make sure to answer your question. He wanted everyone to elaborate on A/B testing approach for SMS. He hasn't heard anyone talking about that so far. Is it just trial and error, or that's a tried and true digital approach is A/B testing? So I see Kent nodding your head a little bit. You want to answer that? Start with the answer.
Yeah, and I think you have to start with understanding what are you trying to A/B test, right? So like email, we certainly test copy no differently than we would test a subject line, right? Beyond that, I think we're in the beginning stages of really trying to understand what has a better return for us, SMS versus another communications channel, right? Like email. So it's a little trickier, right? I think if you're just testing copy, certainly that's something that we Attentive can help with, and you can learn a lot from them. But if you're testing it versus another channel, that really comes down to like a capabilities, and do you have the, what are you really trying to measure, right? Because Brian said it is a more expensive channel. There is probably a reason you would text somebody something versus email. So it's part of our process. It's just not a huge process. I think right now we're more focused on content.
Great. Well, we have like a minute left, so I just wanted to, everything seems to be kind of looking forward to Q4 and the holiday. So maybe just wrap up on a rapid fire, like one thing that you're looking forward to about SMS for the holiday season. Robbie?
Great question. Continuing testing and further segmentation as we go into the last part of the year.
Nicole?
Dittos, and just more engagement, getting people excited about the brand.
Kent?
Yep, both of those. And obviously we have a huge store presence that we have no idea what holiday will look like in the stores. So how do we start to leverage SMS as a communications platform for our customers through curbside, BOPUS, that sort of thing.
All right, Brian, we'll give you the final word.
I'd just say it's noteworthy that some of the big stores like Walmart and other folks are already saying that they're going to be closed on Black Friday, I think, or Black Friday or Thanksgiving. And I think that we're going to see a lot of those sales coming much earlier this year, and B, it's going to be online. These stores are really terrified about the amount of pushing of people together in a closed space that would be really bad for social distancing. So I think that they are going to discourage those type of crowded shopping environments. I think there's a reason they're shutting down on those days that they're worried about. And I think there's going to be a huge push of traffic online. We're doing a lot of work right now just to deal with that expected volume.
Great. Well, Robbie, Nicole, Kent, Brian, thank you all so much for spending some time with our community today. Great information. And we look forward to seeing everyone on our webinars coming up again next Wednesday, August 19th, and then mark your calendar for October 7th for our holiday optimization virtual summit. Have a great afternoon, rest of the week, and enjoy yourselves. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Thank you, everyone.